Welcome in this Sunday edition of On Texas Football. We're going to talk a little recruiting, a little updates here. We're going to start with running backs because obviously with Chad Scott now in Austin getting his feet on the ground, he has started reaching out to a number of running backs in the 2026 class. We're going to start with Javian Osborne because that made the news. Him and Xavier Crowell made the news. Javian Osborne announced on Friday around 5:30, 5:26, I think was the exact time that he was no longer going to be making an official visit to Texas. Well, On Texas Football can now say that Chad Scott has made contact with Javian Osborne and his family members, and that Javian Osborne remains interested in Texas. He actually released official visit dates, and he left June 13th through 15th to be determined, which is when he had the Texas official visit. Here we're watching Javian Osborne, one of the very best running backs in the country. He left that June 13th through 15th official visit date open. And I expect, I think over time, I think we'll see Texas more than likely get an official visit there once again. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I think that's where things could be headed there. I think now that Chad Scott is in Austin again, got his feet on the ground, started contacting some of the top running backs in the country, that it'll be somewhat of a surprise if Javian Osborne doesn't end up making an official visit to Texas, getting him on campus again in the spring. Other running back recruiting news, CJ Vogel put out something that we've been saying for a while, and now it's really with Chad Scott being from Plant City and recruiting Florida for years. He's been in contact with Derek Cooper, the five-star running back out of Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida. Again, we're watching Javian Osborne here. But Derek Cooper, I've been told twice by someone close to that recruitment, he has legitimate interest in Texas. I think we will see Texas get Derek Cooper on campus for a visit this spring and potentially an official visit as well. Then there's a Xavier Crowell out of Jackson, Alabama. He came out within an hour of Tashard Choice announcing he was going to leave last week and a couple of weeks ago, and saying no official visit to Texas June 6th through 8th anymore. And he has Georgia May 30th through June 2nd. Then he has Auburn on the 13th and Alabama on the 20th. That was the four-horse race. I mean, real blue blood recruiting bloodbath there. Well, Xavier Crowell, Friday night at 10, after a conversation with Chad Scott, announced his official visit was back on. So right now, he is the one official visit locked in. KJ Edwards, it's been talked about, the running back from Carthage. Will it be June 13th? Will it be June 6th? We believe he's going to officially visit Texas, but we're waiting to put out a date until we hear more of a finalized date now that Chad Scott's in Austin, kind of how they're setting up those official visits. And we're waiting to see if Chad Scott makes, if he communicates with Amari Latimer out of Tyrone, Georgia, Sandy Creek High. He was a guy that was very high on Texas when Tashard Choice was here. Or will Chad Scott go recruit somebody he really liked at West Virginia, or somebody else that maybe he liked that he couldn't get in on at West Virginia? We'll see there. We're up to 30 official visitors, by the way, confirmed by On Texas Football. I mean, that's a big number for February 23rd. And Bobby and Jeff Howe and I were talking about it earlier today, that the feeling is amongst college coaches, our parents and kids in the circles are pushing to get official visits locked in about 30 days, a month earlier than last year, by and large, right? There were always some kids that had their officials locked in, but it's accelerating a little bit in terms of setting up those official visits. So Texas has 30 official visitors right now. And what does that mean? Last June, Texas had 41 official visitors. I think Texas is going to zip by that number this year. I put a story out on ontexasfootball.com around lunchtime. I could see the number going as high as 55 in June. That may be a little high, but I think we're going mid-40s. I mean, we're at 30 already, and I can give you a rundown of guys, of top targets that haven't locked their official visits in for Texas or haven't announced their dates, and I believe those are coming. I think that takes Texas at 47, 48 at a minimum. And then Texas will offer, they'll get some guys on campus this spring. For instance, March 29th is one of the big visit weekends for Texas around spring practice, whatever you want to call spring practice. Now, they're not going to be a spring game. It's still spring practice, more OTAs, whatever you want to call it. But March 29th, there's a kid, Hayward Howard Jr., a junior corner out of Edna Carr in New Orleans. He's making an unofficial visit March 29th. I could see an official visit coming after that, somewhat similar to what happened with some of the guys in the last class. That was Jamie French had never been on campus till the spring. Myron Charles, Josiah Sharma, Justice Terry never been on campus till a Georgia game during the season. So there's going to be guys that aren't set up for official visits right now. They haven't been on campus, but once they get on campus, if the player and the parents and then Texas say, yeah, this could be a good fit, let's move forward with this recruitment, you're going to see them set up some June official visits. One of those guys is Tristan Keys, the 5-star receiver, along with Derek Cooper, the 5-star receiver out of Hattiesburg High in Mississippi. Tristan Keys is one of the top handful of prospects in the country in this class, in my opinion. I mean, he is a high-end wide receiver, 6'2", 185, electric ball skills, really good route runner. He can really sit in his routes and create separation, really good after the catch, an acrobat of sorts, a really fast starter as well. So you're going to see guys like that that Texas is going to get on campus for the first time, and that could be defensive linemen. That could be a number of positions coming up here that they get on campus and follow through an official visit. But 30 official visitors so far. And if you look at it by state, obviously Texas has the most. California, there's 6 official visitors right now that are locked in with official visits to Texas. Then you get into Georgia and you get into Florida, Louisiana with 3 guys locked in. So you're starting to see those states. I think when it's all said and done, I think there could be 10 or 11 states represented for June official visits. So I want to talk a little bit about the new hires as well. We talked about Chad Scott. Now I'm going to go to Mark Orfe, the corners coach. He's from North Shore High School originally. Obviously came to Texas from Rutgers. For Greg Schiano and that Rutgers staff, they sent him to Florida and Georgia. He was one of the top recruiters on that staff. He's recruited a lot of kids in the state of Florida as well as Georgia, especially maybe south of Atlanta and some of those areas, the Macon area. Warner Robins, Rutgers signed a 4-star corner. Orfe signed a 4-star corner last year over SEC programs. So he's shown some recruiting chops in Florida and Rutgers. What'll be interesting now is where does he head at corner? Because the safety, we can talk about safeties with Terry Joseph having already been on the staff, some guys they really liked at safety. I mean, you have Donovan Webb at Frisco, Panther Creek. You have Aaron Bradshaw at North Crowley. Those guys will set up official visits. I'm talking safeties here. Chase Calicut, the North Shore safety hybrid player. He's scheduled to come in for an official visit to Texas in June already. And then you have Blaine Bradford, the safety out of Baton Rouge Catholic, is scheduled for June 6th for an official visit. I think they trail LSU, maybe even Ohio State, but Terry Joseph has longstanding connections there. But at corner, what Mark Orfe is going to expand this cornerback board. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Right now, you have Jalen Lott, who Orfe has made contact with the Lott family since being hired and since getting to Austin, as you knew he would. But Jalen Lott, I think, is one of the top corners in the country. Some people are recruiting at wide receiver, but I think within his circle, there's a thought that corner may be his highest upside position. But the question is, where does Texas go at the corner position? Jermaine Bishop at Willis is coming in on June 20th. I think Texas leads for Jermaine Bishop heading into the spring. Now, some people say, is he a corner? Is he a receiver? Is he a return man? And he's one of those prospects that's like Michael Terry. He's just so good. Texas they just want to win the recruiting battle and figure it out. But I think there's also a thought within the Bishop circle that maybe corner long-term may be his best position. So that would give Texas 2 top targets in state at corner with a number of safeties. The question is, where do they go at corner from here? I talked about Hayward Howard out of Edna Carr, which is a guy that I think Texas may target after an unofficial visit in March. They offered him January 31st. And then you have Jordan Edmonds out of Sprayberry in Marietta, Georgia, in the Atlanta area. He's going to decide early, but that doesn't mean Texas might not still try to push to get him on campus for a spring unofficial visit and maybe an official visit. He's already backed up a February 18th commitment. I think he's planning to commit later in the spring, but that's one of the Texas offers. Then there's Jordan Thomas up at Bergen Catholic, who told On Texas Football, told us that Texas a possible official visit for him. There's a couple of corners in California that Texas has offered as well. But we'll have to see where Orfe expands this cornerback recruiting board to. I think that'll be something interesting to watch. With Johnny Nansen at linebacker, obviously we know that board pretty well. Then there's edge coach Alan Clark. So he came to Texas not just to be a pass rush specialist coach, not just to coach the edges and have those guys in the edge room. He came to Texas. They've turned over edge recruiting them, which means he'll get assists from PK, he'll get assists from Kenny Baker, and he'll get big assists from Steve Sarkisian when needed. But I think we're also going to see the edge board expand, or Texas work to get some kids on campus that have never been on campus before. Jeff Banks went and offered 4 defensive linemen in Charlotte late in January. We'll see Rodney Dunham, who I think is at the 5-star out of the Charlotte area. I think he's leaning the South Carolina football-baseball combo. But can Texas still get him on campus? Can they get some of those kids on campus? Then there was the offer in Bogart, Georgia, at North Oconee last week by Lyle Clark. His first offer after being announced as a Texas edge coach was Kamari Brooks out of North Oconee, one of the better two-sport athletes in the state of Georgia. He's probably a low-level Division I basketball player if he really put in time and went that direction. But as an edge guy, he's 6'5", 6'5 1/4", 230 pounds, really a high-end prospect at the edge position. But what will Texas do at the edge position with Lyle Clark? I think that's going to be very interesting to see. You know, you have Jamarian Carlton in state. I think Texas likes Carlton. Is he the level of some of the past guys, the guys like Texas recruited, even last year they didn't get Javian Hilson, who ended up going to Missouri. I don't think he's quite that level player. Texas has really upped the ante, and they have really ascended in the edge recruiting area in the last couple of years at Texas. So what does that mean? How many guys? There's Luke Waffle, the edge out of Bergen Catholic in Oradell, New Jersey, that Texas, he's been on campus twice. Texas has been in contact with. They saw him in January. Actually, they didn't see him. He had the flu, so they had to do a Zoom. Kyle Flood had to do a Zoom with him when he was originally supposed to go to the school in January. But where is this edge position going to expand? Because I do think it's still going to expand some because there's a couple of guys that they've had in a couple of times early on that they maybe aren't pushing for, like a Sean Scott from Mater Dei. Could that change? It could change. But it's going to be interesting to see where Texas kind of expands that edge recruiting board here in the next couple of months as Lyle Clark gets his feet underneath him in Austin and starts evaluating some of those guys around the Southeast region and up into the Carolinas. One thing I'll add as well, what do all these new hires mean for Texas recruiting? Chad Scott's very interesting. Plant City, Florida. He's going to recruit Florida. Obviously, he's going to recruit Texas. He's going to recruit in Georgia. He is really going to recruit in the state of North Carolina. He was there 3 years. He's continued to recruit that state, even at West Virginia, and even prior to that at Kentucky. I think we're going to see Texas offer more prospects in the future in the state of North Carolina. A lot of high-level defensive linemen in that state, and those kids are kind of spread out, so you need somebody that knows the lay of the land in North Carolina, can help you get those kids on campus. So I think outside of Florida, outside of Texas, outside of Georgia for Chad Scott, you're going to hear about Texas more in North Carolina. With Mark Orfe, obviously, I think he's going to take over Blake Gideon's recruiting territory in Houston, which that was very important. Missouri City, that Pearland, Manville line, Shadow Creek, Manville High, Pearland, those schools. And then he had Galveston County and South. So Galveston, Ball, Dickinson, some of those schools in that area, Clear Springs. I think you're going to see Orfe. And then, of course, North Shore is going to be his as a North Shore graduate who played for members of that staff. Garrett Cross, the D coordinator, he played for Coach Cross at North Shore. Obviously, Coach Gaston and him have been friends for many, many years. So he's going to have North Shore and probably C.E. King and some of those schools in that area. Then with the two big, though, off the field additions to this staff that kind of rounds out my thoughts on recruiting for the day. Aaron Joe, I think, is an underrated hire. I think it was a huge hire for Texas. Aaron Joe was the GM of Georgia Tech football. Now he comes to head up scouting for the University of Texas. He's from Lakeland, Florida, one of the most talent-rich areas in the whole state, in the Sunshine State. He went to Lake Gibson. Tons of talented players have come out of Lake Gibson. Not as many as Lakeland High, but there's a lot of talent in that area. So he is very familiar with the Southwest Corridor of Florida, Central Florida, heading up, being the GM of Georgia Tech and the Metro Atlanta, and entire state of Georgia. He is an extremely valuable piece to the Texas program that Steve Sarkisian added. Then Josh Dunson, who is the GM at Memphis, that comes on to Texas as well in a role. He is from the Atlanta area. So, again, more ties to the state of Georgia for this Texas staff moving forward. Didn't even have last year with Kenny Baker and Tashard Choice. Texas is really gunning for the states of Florida and the states of Georgia in the future. Alan Clark also is a Baton Rouge guy. So when Bo Davis left for LSU, Texas had a little void in Louisiana there. Alan Clark helps Terry Joseph and Brandon Harris in the state of Louisiana as well. So that's kind of where these Kenoto Hudson, by the way, the new Nichols coach, is originally from Tampa, Florida. He was a high school coach down there before he got to the college ranks. So he has a lot of connections in that Tampa Southwest corridor or area of Florida. So from a Florida perspective, you're going to have Kenny Baker working D lineman down there. Jeff Banks has recruited IMG in some of those areas for years. Now you have Kenoto Hudson and you have Chad Scott, Mark Orfe recruit of Florida. So it's easy to sit there and say Texas is going in the state of Florida and they're ready to battle Florida, Miami, Florida State, and Georgia, who's had a lot of success there, and Clemson, who has had success. You have to really be prepared to know where the players are in Florida because it's spread out so much from Space Coast to Jacksonville to the Panhandle, all these areas. One guy can't cover it. You have to have a number of guys to find all those prospects so your assistant coaches don't waste time on the road. So that's a little bit about where Texas is at from a recruiting perspective today. 30 official visitors. Off the start of the show, I do think Javian Osborne in Texas will continue to talk. I think we could see some positive movement there. We'll see. It's not a guarantee. I think Texas is obviously going to continue to talk to Derek Cooper. I think you'll see him on campus this spring. Potential for a June official visit. The former Georgia commitment top running back in the country by some people out of Chaminade, Madonna. And then 6 receivers now have official visits set after the 3 yesterday. Naeem Burrows, who's an absolute jetpack at receiver at the Bowles School. And then you had a couple of others guys added as well to that mix. Aaron Gregory, the Texas A&M commitment from Douglas County, is one of the best in the country, as well as Chris Stewart, the Texas commitment, added his official visit for June 13th. So that's a little bit about where we're at for recruiting. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you tonight on the Longhorn live stream.